All right, so I'm here to talk about Rky Camp. Now, the last time we chatted was essentially a pandemic ago. So I'm going to bring you up to speed. And there's a few things to cover. It's been an exciting time for the camp. And so I'm going to go through that. I'm a camp director, so I do tend to ramble. So I am going to keep on task here as a promise to you all. So as a summary, and because I know some of you are aware of our backstory, but the camp was completely closed in 2020. We had a zero revenue year. And so that, that gave us pause, if you will, for a number of different reasons. We operationally, we were able to run some things in 2021 following public health protocol. We were able to run a family camp, which wasn't anything to write home about in terms of revenue, but it was exposure. We just couldn't disappear for 2 years. And then what we did at the end of 2021, and it's something that I want to emphasize is probably the reason why we're able to recover the way we are today, is that our board of directors supported my initiative to run something on site for overnight camping. So we had youth on site during the pandemic. We hired staff and had them quarantined for 2 weeks with pay. Wrote into their contracts that they could not leave site for days off. And so we essentially locked them down for a month. It turns out they loved that idea. And then we invited 70 youth, between 14 and 16 to site at the end of the summer. And we ran a leadership retreat, and where we condensed our leadership program and our counseling and training program into 2 weeks. Fast forward, we did open up last year to about 70% capacity. Where am I on the slides? Here, there. We opened up last year to 70% capacity with technically a full staff team. And the reason we were able to do that is because we had enough counselors from the year before. So I would say it was a success. In the moment, I had different opinions about it. It was a challenging summer. Our staff really had a lot of challenges in terms of living together. That's 60 staff members between the ages of 17 and 21 who haven't had a roommate in 2 years are now living together and working together for 2 months straight. So you can imagine. I won't draw with that. That's a whole other presentation. I don't have a degree to. Yeah. And so, but the campers, there was camp magic happening again. The campers enjoyed their time. We had a net promoter score of 84, which, if you're familiar with net promoter scores, is quite high. It's the highest out of YMCA affiliated camps in Canada, the average being 60. So we weathered the storm thanks to a supportive board that allowed us to do the things that were controversial the year before. So, because that is not a decision I could make on my own, or I needed the confidence of the board behind me. 2023, we are back. Sorry, we're at 95% of 2019 camper enrollment, and I think I want to focus on this. We are supporting 30% more campers this summer to come to camp than we did pre-pandemic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. So that is a mandate by the board, and it's a passion project of the camp. So they really meld well together. And we've increased the amount we've given to families from 65% to somewhere upwards of 95% to respect inflationary pressures on low-income families. Our old assessment did not hold up. We would do an assessment for a family and they say, that's nice, thank you, but I still can't afford that. So we not only increased the amount of campers we support, but we've increased the amount of funds we've allocated. So we were well supported through our pandemic recovery. We took full advantage of the CEWS wage subsidy program. We were made whole by that with our staff. We didn't have to lay any staff off, so we were able to keep the camp moving. We all bought a lottery ticket after this because we were successful in our business interruption insurance claim dating back to 2020. So we received north of $400,000 in an insurance claim, which went directly towards the mortgage on our build, which you can imagine left us in a precarious position in the middle of a $2.1 million construction project, and we lose all of our revenue. And so that would be the gray hairs you're seeing in my beard. But the business interruption claim, with the support of our board and our expertise in terms of navigating that process, because it was quite weedy. But we came out on the other end. The Trillium Foundation has been a huge supporter of the camp. Don's been my partner in crime over the last 8 years with the Trillium Foundation, helping me out being signatory, but also actually helping with closing reports. It's quite an involved process, but the Trillium Foundation has helped the camp in an immense way. Notably for the pandemic recovery, we received almost $50,000 directly to our bottom line to cover fixed costs, which was refreshing. It was, here's something to help you keep whole. And then the Ontario Tourism Grant. So that brings us to now. We have recovered. We are a healthy camp. We have a healthy set of books, and we have a good reputation, and we're ready to move forward. But we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about what the camp could be, what the camp needs. And the board and myself realized that we need more. Our auditor calls it bench strength. So we added some more bench strength to our team. So my new role, like Don said, is the executive director. It's the first time we've had that position at the camp in its history. And so now we've hired a full-time summer camp director to focus entirely on the summer camp operations. And we're already seeing benefits of it. You know, the engagement with the staff members. They live on site in the camp director's house year round. So they're engaged, they're there, they're involved, they relate to the staff, they're closer to their age. And so, yeah, we're seeing the benefits right away, and I'm able to kind of take a higher level and look to the future, because we realized we didn't see the pandemic coming. Nobody did, but it is nice to look ahead to see what's coming. Board of directors. So our bylaws changed in 2019 to allow the RKY board to reach out and recruit specific individuals. And so what we have right now is a board of directors with a huge skill set. And still representing our founding members. I want to make a note that there are 6 of 10 Rotarians right now on the board. It is a huge presence in our governance leadership. We have moved forward in that 10 years that Don said, thanks in huge part to the experience that Rotary brings in terms of management and expertise. So we wouldn't be able to be where we are right now without the bylaws being changed to adapt. And so I would say we're in a very healthy place. Okay, I just want to go through, I just want to go through our revitalization campaign. So this is still ongoing. We're constantly revitalizing the camp. But essentially when Rotary heard about our revitalization campaign back in 2014, I'm sure, when we went into Britt Smith's office and said, this is what we'd like to do with the camp. And Britt Smith of Homestead, I don't think I need to tell everyone who Britt Smith is in Kingston, wrote a $100,000 check to the camp and said, come back in a year with a plan. And to quote, see if you can squeeze some more juice out of this lemon. And now to this date, I do want to take a moment to recognize Britt. To this date, Britt has given the camp since 2014 over $1 million to our efforts. So
Got 103.
Yeah.
Years old.
And supports our campership fund through a fund through the community foundation. So I want to leave everyone with that memory of this presentation, that as Don, he says, Britt Smith is the patron saint of RKY Camp. And so, but there were others. We raised over $2 million in our campaign to date. And what that did was it bought a year-round director's house. It allowed my family at the time to live on site, which was not a possibility in the old structure. So personally, I would not be here if it weren't for the house. So that was a really big win for my family. And we still live on site during the summer, but we live in a cottage that's on site, and the director lives in the house. The new dining hall was $2.1 million. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend checking it out. It's a beautiful building. And we were able to renovate the former dining hall into a conference center. Who's been to Ryla? Right? So I was up at Ryla on the weekend. You know, I gave an intro and I looked around and I realized we're using this dining hall, this old dining hall, exactly the way we were hoping to. Youth conferences to come out, to have breakout space, to use the camp in a different way, to still achieve our mission, vision, and values. And Ryla is the perfect example of that. So the renovation of the former dining hall was made possible by an alumni family, the Stewart family. And so that building will now be called, used to be called the Homestead. Thank you to Britt Smith, who facilitated the construction in 1979. It's now called the Stewart Family Outdoor Center. And the new dining hall is still the Homestead. That has to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it fits. Many of our alumni have no idea that there's a connection between Homestead and the Homestead because the name just makes sense. But there is, and that's the connection. And our future projects, working on a new camp shower house. Who has been to a volunteer work weekend here before at camp? Who has seen the shower house? Who thinks it should be replaced?
We dare go into.
Yeah. So,
Why can't you just swim in the lake? Why don't you shower?
well, you talk to the Ministry of Environment about that. So the new camp shower house will be built as soon as I jump through a couple permit hurdles. But we'll get there. We have the money for it in the bank and we're ready to build a new shower house. And I'm working on fundraising, and we are working on fundraising for a new medical center at the camp, which can act as a year-round home for organizing conferences, so the organizing committee can have a proper place to stay 10 months of the year, or teachers visiting teachers, multi-purpose space that, and if you talk to any of our volunteer nurses or doctors at the camp, the amount of medication and needs that are coming through with our camper population has increased significantly in the last 10 years. So we really need a clinic. Yeah. So as RKY does, we make do, but that's part of our long-term plan, unless something jumps in our way. So there's the new homestead. That's at the entrance of the camp. That's it from the back, the camper side. This is inside. So I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but I really want to make a plug here. So timber to table was the philosophy we approached the building with. You know, to build a environmentally neutral or sustainable building is a budget that doesn't even come close to what we could afford. So we're like, how do we make an impact with this building and respect the natural world and the philosophy of the camp? So what we did was we partnered with a local business, Westwood Rustic, and we took all of the trees that were removed in the building process, milled them, dried them, and fabricated them, and they're now the tables and chairs in the dining room. And so there's a plaque on each one of those tables for every major donor that has supported the camp. And so I do have to embarrass someone here. There's a Don and Judy Heath table in there. And for many reasons why Don's name should be up there. So that's a beautiful room and it's a great conversation piece. And it was nice to see those beautiful sugar maples go to some use. Yeah. And they'll last forever. They weigh 200 pounds. This is the Stewart Family Outdoor Center. Not the best photo, I'm sorry. But we just converted our old dining hall into a conference center. Rotary Centennial Grant. Who, some of you may have forgotten about this because your centennial was what, how many years ago?
Oh, seems like
Forever ago. We're still working on it. We have replaced 27 sections of floating dock thanks to the Rotary Club's Centennial Grant. And you can see it there. We took our old floating docks, which were 6 feet wide, and we made them all 8 feet wide. And 27 sections. It's a huge network of docks on the waterfront. And you can imagine the cost of lumber went up through the pandemic. So we waited until things would come down, buy a bulk amount of lumber, and then use internal labor and volunteer labor to build them. So we've been able to keep within the scope of the project by extending it out over 3 years, which doesn't, maybe sounds like an excuse why it's taken so long, but it has worked out. The final step, and I have the drawings, but they're too awkward to fit into the diagram, is that we have found a replacement jumping tower, which is the iconic image of RKY Camp. So it had to be something we did right. So that will be in place in the fall, and I'll be able to share with Rotary the entire new waterfront with a sign that recognizes the club and its centennial efforts. So this is me with an update, and I'm not quite finished yet, but it will happen this year.
How many anchors tied to the dock?
Okay, so that little horseshoe right there has two very large and very deep anchors out on each corner. It's a 90-foot deep end.
That's the only place they are.
Yeah, well, and then because there's a couple spots where it's fixed along the waterfront.
Okay.
Yeah, and they need to have some movement because we don't
Yeah.
take them out in the winter. We don't have anywhere to put them, so they've got to have some play. Okay, so I'd like to talk about what RKY is doing for DEI efforts. How's my time?
You're good.
Okay, great. So diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some people have a different acronym and whatnot. I would add I onto that. So Queens use indigeneity, which I'll talk about in a moment. So our campership fund, I did mention that before, and I should have waited to the end, but I'm very excited about what we're doing with our campership fund right now. So we've increased the disbursement and we've supported more campers, and they're still coming in. That's at 68. When I made this 2 days ago, that's at 72 now. Because what we've done is we've completely capped our registration. We're not, it looks closed. And so now we know that we can just fill it as we find campers in need. Because we really need to get up to, I want to get us to that 10% level of where we're supporting 10% of our campers. The national average for YMCA affiliated camps is 4%. So we used to be that, but now we can be so much more because we have some incredible donors that have been building confidence in our ability to give out funds. The Dunnan Foundation, who was connected with Queen's University. Andrew Dunnan was a counselor at RKY. Sent us a check sends us a check every year. And with that confidence, we're able to hand out more money. So we're very excited about that. Staff wages. So when I first worked at summer camp, my first year I made an honorarium because I didn't get paid, which is fine. I survived. Yeah, well, but you know what? I had parents that could pay my bills.
Yeah, right.
So I did fine. I had a safety net. So I was like, I could be at camp and no problem. And then fast forward, I made $100 a week the next year. Now, in 2019, our first year staff made $225 a week. And we had a full staff team and we had the best scores in the country. And we were just sitting pretty. But you know what? We didn't have a staff team that reflected the camper population we had. You get to CIT, and if your parents can afford to send you at the old subsidy rates, it's a $3,500 fee for a month. So if you were able to get to CIT supported, but your parents are like, I can't support you not making any money next year. Then you became a counselor in training and realized about halfway through the session that you won't be that counselor that you wanted to be. And so the dream just kind of fizzles. And by the end of the session, you're like, had a good time. Great. Thanks for the memories. And then you don't become staff. So fast forward, working with the board, and this is serious board level sign off because we increased wages going into 2022 by 50%. That's a $60,000 knock to our bottom line. That was unanimously supported by the board. And we're continuing to push to that way. By 2025, likely we'll be paying the equivalent of minimum wage for a staff member to work at camp. The challenge is that the overnight camp structure is geared to inequality. We even have a labor law clause that the government says you don't have to pay your staff minimum wage because you work at summer camp. So that's history of, you know, whoever makes the laws, their kids went to camp, they understand it. This is baked in culture of summer camp that has allowed us to get away with that. And people can still get away with it. That's fine because they'll fill their staff teams, but they won't fill their staff teams with the campers that come to camp if you're a charity. So that's where we're going. And we're on track and we're already seeing it. We're seeing a staff team that's more diverse. Camp Employment Equity Fund, which is a grant that our current summer camp director created for Y Canada when he worked for YMCA Camp Elphinstone. He has a passion for equity and diversity. And so that fund supports underrepresented BIPOC populations to work at camp. So it pays travel, pays certifications, pays for gear that you wouldn't have. And so right now, one of our staff members at camp was a refugee from I forget the country, and I don't want to just make one up. No, it's somewhere in Africa. Through this fund, we now have a wellness staff member that is a nursing student that is working at camp. So we're seeing some movement. Diversity in this community in Kingston is, if you look at it through a socioeconomic lens, that's covered. We have a wide variety, but visually, we don't have as diverse a community as we would like, but we're starting to see that at camp. So anyhow, those are some of the efforts we have for diversity at camp. And so truth and reconciliation efforts at the camp. So I want to talk about truth. So acknowledging truth is difficult. The camp has a problematic history of appropriating Indigenous culture for programming. You know, some people might have grown up at camp and they were the little chief in their cabin and there was an Indian council at the end of the session and it was baked into the culture of the camp. So we did some research and we looked through some primary documents that you can now scan through Google. Google will, if you look it up, you can see it's photocopies and it'll pull the words out. And we found out that some of our programming in the past was pulled out of the Boy Scouts Guide of America to Indigenous Culture. So it was a textbook on how to appropriate Indigenous culture. So we are working through that right now, and some of our programs have changed, but the thing is the core was still a problematic program. So now we've removed all of that and started fresh. And so part of that is also that our cabins were named after Indigenous communities, which we did not have permission to do. And we were using colonial spelling. So we felt the best thing to move forward was that we look what the kids can relate to, and that's local tree species. So now our cabins are all tree names. Our camp logo was a Thunderbird. We don't have an official camp logo yet. We have the lettering and we're working on that, but that takes some intentional efforts that we don't want to have as a side of our desk kind of project. So for now, we're still filling camp and camp's still happening and we can wait for a proper logo and maybe we get some grant funding to get some graphic design. But right now we know that it is not appropriate to have the Thunderbird as part of it anymore. And I'm fine with that. It turns out we pulled it off of a skateboard company's logo in the 90s. So yeah, well, I got really in the weeds on the research. And then historic programs, like I said before. But I also want to note that there's been a totem pole that's been at camp for a number of years. That's been in our craft shed that we found out was a craft project at the camp. And so we're actually removing it tomorrow with the staff team, and we're laying it to rest. We don't know what we're going to do with it in the long run, but we know right now we just can't keep looking at it. So the whole staff team is doing that exercise tomorrow.
Have you reached out to the Indigenous group to see if maybe on Highway 15, maybe there's some ceremony around putting it up?
So
like, they're quite collectible, I can tell you that.
Yeah. It was a thing made by the campers at the camp, so we determined it was like a craft project, which is why it's not something. But also there's we're still looking to connect with our communities. There is some, I don't know if you're familiar with the Queen's some of the Queen's controversies, but we're looking to connect more with our local community, and we're getting closer to that. But we have representation on our board now. Helena Naveau is a employee at St. Lawrence College and is their Indigenous knowledge keeper. So Helena is a board member and it's been an incredible support for us. believe that's it.